Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is the latest game in the Zelda franchise and the Hyrule Warriors series, and unsurprisingly, it's also a pretty damn good entry. Age of Imprisonment was announced during the Nintendo Direct that was actually showcasing the Switch 2, and while I wouldn't call it the most hype thing we saw in that lineup, it most certainly piqued my interest. I also did think it was funny that right when I thought I was getting close to the end of my Zelda marathon, boom, another game for me to tack on. Thanks for that, Nintendo. This was all part of Nintendo's big launch year for the Switch 2. A lineup of games that I feel sort of quietly made the Switch 2 already a bit of a banger console to pick up. You had the updates for Switch 1 games like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Party Jamboree, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, a healthy amount of third-party support with Cyberpunk 2077, Hades 2, and Deltarune, some cross-gen games that are on both systems like Pokemon Legends ZA and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and of course, some exclusive titles like Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Kirby Air Riders, that weird Drag X Drive game, okay, that one was kind of a miss, and the game that we're here to talk about today, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. A game that I feel like has kind of gone under the radar for a lot of people outside of the Zelda community because of how many games have come out recently that are either good or bad, but making the headlines a little bit more crowded. Which is a bummer because I legitimately think that Age of Imprisonment is a great fucking video game, and also probably the overall best of the Hyrule Warriors series. Sure, there are some things that I think both of the other games do a little bit better in some regards, like the roster, the side content, the more strategic battles, but I would still say I had the most fun while playing Age of Imprisonment. It doesn't really do that much differently from Age of Calamity, but the minor additions it does have make the moment-to-moment gameplay better than it's ever been before. The performance being far better than the previous other games is also a massive plus for me, and let me just say, if Tears of the Kingdom story left you more on the unsatisfied side, I think you might actually really like what Age of Imprisonment has going on here. I overall walked away from Age of Imprisonment pretty surprised with the amount of improvements there were, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see many people cite this game as one of their favorites in the Switch 2's library even a few years down the line from now. So the previous Hyrule Warriors game, Age of Calamity, was often called one of the worst performing games on the original Switch. The game was locked to 30 FPS, but frequently dipped far below that. And for a Musou game, flashy and fast-paced are two of the biggest selling points, and when a game like this feels choppy or slow, that can really hamper the entire experience. Enter Age of Imprisonment, and what a fucking upgrade we have. The game shoots for 60 FPS, and while there's some semi-frequent dips into the low 50s, they are far less noticeable or disruptive as they were in the previous game. You're still gonna catch things here and there, especially during times when there's several dozens of enemies on screen at once, or when you're launching one of your attacks that has an insane amount of particle effects, but there was never a single point in this game where I thought the frame rate caused an issue for my enjoyment. I will say the multiplayer mode will take you down to 30 FPS if you play on split screen, but what's really cool is that you actually also have the option that if someone has their own Switch 2, they can actually use their console to avoid playing split screen, and that keeps the frame rate right back up to 60 where it belongs. One of the things about this game I was super surprised to see was the file size. Over 42 gigabytes, double what was required in Tears of the Kingdom. Given that the Switch 2 is already a console with a far lower storage space, seeing Nintendo games start to kind of creep higher and higher does have me considering upgrading my storage a little bit more often. It's obviously nothing like a 200 gigabyte Call of Duty game or anything ridiculous like that, but 42 gigabytes is approaching 20% of the basic Switch 2's storage, which, given we aren't even into the second year of this console's life yet, that does kind of raise an eyebrow for me. I think a large portion of the storage had to have gone to the cutscenes. Age of Imprisonment is a very story-focused game with a lot of cutscenes, and given that they're all pre-rendered, we have to assume a significant portion of that 42 gigabytes was made up of what we see here. And there was almost certainly something done with these cutscenes to even get them down to that file size in the first place. These cutscenes seem to run at a much lower resolution and are also capped at 30 FPS, which I'm assuming was probably done to cut down on file size. This can, however, make bouncing back and forth between gameplay and cutscenes a little jarring. Age of Imprisonment isn't running at 4K resolution or anything either, but the image quality in-engine is far more crisp than what we see in the cutscenes, which is a very noticeable downgrade when we enter one. As for the art style, I mean, what more can I really say about it that I haven't already said before in any of my other videos about Zelda games from this era? I do love the Breath of the Wild art style. I think it's one of my overall favorite looks for the series by now. That being said, we've had it for 4 games like this now. Link took this look for Smash Ultimate. I'm just at a point now where I still like what I'm seeing, but I think it's time for a fresh coat of paint for the next mainline game. It's not quite to the level where I would get really upset if the next game had the same exact aesthetics as these, but I think most people can probably agree that for whatever the next mainline Zelda game turns out to be, we'd like to see a new take on the visuals. The game setting looks good because it looked good in Tears of the Kingdom, because it looked good in Breath of the Wild. The only real thing I have to comment on is the design of the new characters, and yeah, we have some pretty awesome looking ones here. The highlight here is definitely the Knight Construct. Give me this as a Link skin in the next Smash game, Nintendo. This is just a fucking awesome design. Which, if we're going to talk about the Knight Construct, I guess it's only fitting that we get into the story, because would you believe me if I told you it was actually one of the best parts of this game? Yeah, seriously, after I had some pretty notable issues with both OG Hyrule Warriors and Age of Calamity stories, I was surprised to see just how much I enjoyed everything this time around. You want to know the main reason behind this? Because I'll tell you. This has been confirmed canon to the events of Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah, unlike Age of Calamity, which tried to have its cake and eat it too with its alternative timeline bullshit, everything in this game actually happened during Zelda's time in the past, which, man, you don't know how happy I was to see that. I liked what happened in Age of Calamity, but throughout that game, I kept saying to myself, so what? Since nothing ultimately mattered in that game's plot, since it was a big what-if scenario. It was still enjoyable, no doubt, but with Age of Imprisonment being canonized, it made what was actually going on far more interesting, even if I knew what the end result was going to be. Which, yeah, a bit of spoilers because I do want to talk about this game's plot, so be wary since this game is new and all. Age of Imprisonment takes place immediately after the events of the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom, with Zelda being transported back in time, and her being found by the original King and Queen of Hyrule, Rauru and Sonia. From there, the game plays out the events from what we originally saw in Tears of the Kingdom, but now we actually get proper context and far more fleshed out details for everything we experienced before. In Tears of the Kingdom, we see Ganondorf attack Hyrule with some Moldugas, but now in Age of Imprisonment, we also see that he also tricked Artie, the person who would become the Gerudo Sage, into leading another force to attack Hyrule Castle as a way of attempting to deceive Rauru. In Tears of the Kingdom, we see Ganondorf attack Sonia and steal her secret stone to become the Demon King, but now in Age of Imprisonment, we also see how Rauru regrets his decision of believing he could control Ganondorf and how he copes with what it cost him. In Tears of the Kingdom, we see the final battle that has Rauru seal Ganondorf away, but in Age of Imprisonment, we also see the events that lead up to that final battle that make the stakes seem even higher when we already know the outcome. These details add a lot to the character's depth and the world building of this new version of Hyrule that took the things that I legitimately enjoyed with Tears of the Kingdom and made them far more interesting and emotionally impactful. Tears of the Kingdom's story, while enjoyable, felt like there was a lot of details that were either missing or never elaborated on that ultimately made the game feel lesser in my eyes. Like, take for example the sages in that game. Could you name any of them? I played that game twice, and I don't recall a sage ever explicitly being named. And after just looking it up, no, the sages were never actually named at all. Which I guess you could make a case that it didn't really matter, but from a character standpoint, I didn't really have a reason to care about them since I knew nothing about them other than their title. And don't get me wrong, I still don't think that these sages hold a candle to the Guardians from Breath of the Wild or anything, but hey, I can tell you their names and personality traits now, so that's a step in the right direction. The real development here comes with our time with characters like Zelda, Rauru, Minoru, Sonia, and Ganondorf. Zelda, man, I'm just so happy that Nintendo is giving her the reins a lot more recently, with her having an active role in the story. Just keep doing this, I love it. Rauru, probably one of my favorite characters in the series now. We learn more about what caused the collapse of the Zonai race, which makes both his and Minoru's story more tragic. We get to see him go through more character development as he comes to grips with Sonia's death. By the end of the game, I fucking feel for this guy, and it makes his sacrifice even more noble. Minoru and Sonia both acting as a sort of mentor role to Zelda is also great, and Ganondorf is once again awesome. He's always at his best when he's outsmarting all of the other heroes, and this game shows how cunning he can really be. The new characters that really steal the show here are Calamo and the Knight Construct. Calamo is this little Korok that kind of almost gives me this Rocket Raccoon vibe, given how obnoxious and self-serving he can be, which that kind of makes the Knight Construct his Groot in this situation, given that he's more on the pure-hearted side. The Knight Construct actually acts as one of my favorite characters in the game too, all without saying a single word, believe it or not. Yes, he is the stand-in for Link in this game. I mean, just look at him. But he's got such a cool backstory that I'm totally here for. Essentially, the piece of the Master Sword that scratched Ganondorf's face in the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom is also sent back in time with Zelda, but thanks to Calamity bringing it to a nearby Zonai construct, it reshapes itself in Link's image and helps the Hyrulean army during the Imprisoning War. That is such a fucking cool idea, and I'm so here for it. He's also a part of so many good moments in this game, from the cold as fuck fight with the Dark Construct, to him summoning a version of the Master Sword and hearing an echo of Link's scream during the final battle, to him dying and Calamity deciding to take up roots next to him where he fell in battle to forever honor his legacy as they both become forgotten soldiers. Oh fuck man, when did this game get sad? Calamity actually becomes a tree that you can visit in Tears of the Kingdom too, which, what a fucking awesome way to give some significance to an area that most people either glossed over or never encountered during their playthrough of that game. I love it. A lot of people took issue with a number of things in Tears of the Kingdom story. I am an avid Tot K enjoyer myself, and I still think it's overall the weakest story of the 3D games. But after playing through Age of Imprisonment's story, I now have a question. Was this content intentionally cut from Tears of the Kingdom in order to make this game? Or was this game an attempt to fix things in Tears of the Kingdom? I don't think we'll ever get a definitive answer to that question, but what I can say is that Age of Imprisonment took something as significant as the Imprisoning War and made it feel important in a way that Tears of the Kingdom didn't do nearly as good of a job at. Maybe it was having a more straightforward narrative, maybe it was giving all these characters more screen time, maybe it was just taking the foundation and expanding upon what was already there. I think it's a combination of all of the above, really. Either way, this is a great Zelda story. It's not like Red Dead 2 levels of storytelling in video games by any means, but I think there's still a ton to enjoy here. Now, the story was not something that I expected to enjoy nearly as much as I did, but when it comes to the gameplay, I had a pretty good idea of what I was getting myself into. What I expected was Age of Calamity that didn't look like a PowerPoint presentation, and that was more or less what I got. There are of course some differences that I'll get into, but if you just described this game as Age of Calamity with good performance centered around characters and settings from Tears of the Kingdom, you would pretty much hit the nail on the head. And if that sounds good to you, then congratulations. Age of Imprisonment is a game that I think you'll really enjoy. But if you were hoping for more of that OG Hyrule Warriors influence to creep its way in, I think you're going to be a little bit disappointed. So, much like Age of Calamity, Age of Imprisonment is centered around doing various missions around this map of ancient Hyrule, the Depths, and the Sky Islands. You'll select the missions you want to do, use shops to upgrade your characters and their gear, and choose what to unlock from this menu exactly like you did in the previous game. And also like the previous game, all of those alternative modes that exist in the original Hyrule Warriors are nowhere to be found here. I kind of expected this going in, so it really wasn't that surprising. That being said, OG Hyrule Warriors still has the crown when it comes to side content. OG Hyrule Warriors is also the only game that has any real strategic gameplay here. Honestly, Age of Imprisonment doesn't really have much in the way of mission variety at all. There isn't really anyone to escort, you don't ever have to defend your outpost. It really just is as simple as running down goons until you find a boss and then blowing your abilities on them. You will never have a situation where you'll lose a battle unless you run out of health, which I was disappointed with seeing that in Age of Calamity, and I'm disappointed here too. The combat itself, for the most part, is still pretty one-note button mashy. I played through the game on the medium difficulty, and I never had a death in my playthrough, so if you're looking for something to up the ante a little bit, the harder difficulties may suit you a bit better. And while we're getting into the negatives, maybe it's best if I get my biggest one out of the way. This roster, man, it's by far the worst of the three games. The original Hyrule Warriors had decades worth of content to pull from, and while the base roster was primarily focused on Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, the DLC for that game was a who's who of all of your favorite Zelda characters, which was an absolute treat. Age of Calamity, by comparison, just focused on Breath of the Wild's roster, but that was okay because there was a lot of characters to pull inspiration from still. Age of Imprisonment draws from Tears of the Kingdom, but only during the time of the Imprisoning War itself, meaning you get the characters you'd expect like Rauru, Zelda, Minoru, the Four Sages, the new characters such as Calamo and the Night Construct, but the rest are all original. And original is about the nicest thing I can say about them, because they're all inconsequential foot soldiers from the various armies. I honestly don't think some of these guys even get any dialogue outside of the missions where you unlock them. I'm all for having original characters here, especially some that could help flesh out the world a little bit more, but these guys basically basically only exist to pad the roster out and fill out moveset ideas that couldn't be put on the other characters. Most of them play just fine, and there are some that have some pretty fun gimmicks, but I feel like there is almost always a better option than those guys, so unless you really click with one of their movesets, I don't think there's really any reason to pick them over the more interesting characters. Also, how come Queen Sonia isn't playable? I know she gets taken out a little earlier in the story, but let us use her for optional missions. I'm really surprised we couldn't play as her. Or how about Ganondorf? I would have honestly bet money on us being able to use him, but nope, we get nothing. The Forbidden Construct from the story would have been a good choice too. Surprised he's not there. I'm really hoping that we get some DLC or something to add more onto here, because we only have 21 different playable characters, and 3 of those are just different forms of the Knight Construct, and another 10 being the various army members of the different tribes who I'm really not that interested in playing. So I really only have half the available roster here to play around with. Overall, this roster just feels like a massive step down from what we saw before. The characters that are here are still thankfully incredibly fun to play. So much so in fact that I can confidently say that the moment-to-moment gameplay is my favorite in the series overall. That being said, I would say that the character-specific kits are a little bit more centralized, if that makes any sense. Like, we get some unique abilities like Zelda being able to rewind time with some of her attacks, or one of the Hyrule Warriors using her dagger like a boomerang, but I still wouldn't say we have as many unique character mechanics as we did in Age of Calamity. There are definitely some characters that I think shine a little bit brighter than others, like the Knight Construct, Rauru, and Calamo, but for the most part, everyone is pretty pick up and play. So if the characters aren't as unique or complex as they were in the last game, why did I say that the moment-to-moment gameplay is still my favorite? Well, I think Age of Imprisonment streamlines all the characters' movesets enough that everyone still has their own flavor, but they play mostly similar to the point where I feel like you could slot any character into any situation and you could immediately get a feel for them. I know to some that might be a bit of a downgrade, but I think there's definitely some pros to this too. While the individual character kits got shaved down a little bit, that doesn't make this game more simple, as there is a lot of new additions to the combat that I really do think give the game a little bit more depth. My favorite of these has to be the sync strikes. So the way that these works is that your character will slowly build up this little meter around their icon, and when 2 of these characters' meters are full and they're in close proximity together, they can team up for an ultimate attack. And these really come in 2 flavors. Flavor 1 is each of these characters will do a move one after another, such as Calamo throwing elemental fruit, or one of the warriors doing a super powerful strike. The other and more interesting flavor is when the 2 characters have a unique move together. This will be things like Calamo riding on the Knight Construct and raining elemental explosions from above, Zelda and Minoru using her construct from Tears of the Kingdom, or Zelda and Rauru teaming up for a double light beam Kamehameha looking thing. These are a lot of fun and are always a spectacle to see. The other biggest defining trait of Age of Imprisoment's combat is how it implements special abilities and the Zonai devices. As much as I enjoyed Age of Calamity, one thing I didn't really see much from that game was how it adapted Breath of the Wild's mechanics and put them into a new context. We got some things such as the Sheikah Slate abilities and all the various items and weapons you could collect, but overall, I think Age of Imprisonment does a much better job of adapting one of Tears of the Kingdom's main gameplay focuses here. So every character will have 5 different slots they can use as hotkeys for various actions. It could be healing with some rations, it could be using one of their special abilities to counter a boss's attack, or it could be one of the many Zonai devices that make their return here. You could also choose to fumble through the menu if you want the authentic Tears of the Kingdom experience, but don't do that to yourself, just use the hotkeys, come on. The abilities that each of the characters have is pretty much just a counter to whatever the boss is doing at any given time, like how the Sheikah Slate was used in Age of Calamity. But the Zonai devices really do spice things up a bit. You'll have all the elemental emitters for stacking fire, lightning, or ice damage, the hydrant for getting rid of goop that enemies use as defense boosts, bombs for taking out shields, the cannon and lasers for long range, the fan to get rid of the sand buff and jumping into the air, rockets for getting around quickly, the hot air balloon for fast travel. There's really a good amount of stuff here that does make every character feel like they have a ton of options at any given time. You are limited by your battery meter, much like how you were in Tears of the Kingdom, which, yeah, this game has a lot of meters now that I think about it. But wait, there's more. Yeah, you can actually fuse your items together to your weapons, giving them various elemental or stat boosts. I admittedly didn't do this too much since I was worried about needing a particular item for upgrades, because the grind for upgrading your gear and characters is still very real in this game. But hey, the option was always there. Hell, the Knight Construct himself can actually augment his combos with the Zonai devices to make him easily the most customizable and freeform character in the entire series. Seriously, Seriously, just imagine Link from Age of Calamity, but you can change the elemental properties of his combos and do freeform fuses with your items. He's easily my favorite character in this game. I just love this guy. You combine all of these things together, and yeah, these characters are some of the most versatile out of any Hyrule Warriors game. You're going to need that too, because while many of the bosses are your standard, hit them until they die, counter when they do their big move type of thing like we saw in Age of Calamity, now the main bosses this go around will actually have some different phases to them. They aren't the deepest thing in the world, but I do think they're a pretty big step up from the previous game. Oh, what else is there? Oh, remember that sort of weird occasional mission in Age of Calamity where you took control of one of the divine beasts? Well, our equivalent here will have the Knight construct turn into this weird eagle thing and essentially turns this game into a rail shooter. Nintendo would really rather have an R-Wing section in a Zelda game before giving us another Star Fox. That's really something. Anyways, these are fine enough. Probably some of the most standard rail shooter segments that you've ever seen in a game before. But if I'm being honest, I don't see myself ever really returning to these levels. So overall, while there are most certainly some things that I think Hyrule Warriors DE and Age of Calamity do better than Age of Imprisonment, the simple act of running around a large battlefield, killing monsters and bosses, and using flashy-ass combos has never felt better. The new implementations to the combat add some new depth, while also streamlining the characters to the point where I feel like everyone could be viable. I do look forward to seeing what this game will have with upcoming DLC, since I think there could be a lot more it fleshes out, but for the time being, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Out of all the games that I played on my Switch 2 this year, I think Age of Imprisonment surprised me the most. I went in expecting a slight improvement over Age of Calamity, maybe just the same formula, but the game runs a little bit better. And not only did I get a much better performing game, but also one that adds some new fun gameplay mechanics, one that really expanded upon the source material for its use of the Zonai devices, and a story that I would seriously say is on par with some of the better stories in the series. Yeah, I still can't believe it's as good as it was. It's shocking to me too. If this game gets a big boost of the roster with DLC, I think we could really have the undisputed Hyrule Warriors experience here. But as it is one of the main things I look back on the previous games, and I think to myself, those games just did it a little bit better. Maybe this is just me talking, but I would really like to see more of the side modes that we had in Hyrule Warriors DE, and a bigger focus on the strategical play on the combat field. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I felt like that was a really important part of the winning formula for Hyrule Warriors, and I'm kind of missing those aspects as I play more and more of these games. Overall though, Age of Imprisonment was a great time, and is one that I think that if you enjoyed any of the Musou style games before, or if you wanted an expanded version of Tears of the Kingdom story, you should definitely consider. $70 might be a bit steep for some, but if you're an avid Zelda fan, I think you could do far worse, which is why I can definitely recommend Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment to you.